So, hi everybody. This is Christopher Phillips starting off 2020 with my brand new broadcast, Cafe Aretista, or the Aretista Cafe. Still in a molten state. An Aretista is somebody who strives to live a life of all-around excellence, to break down those kinds of divides that can divide us, that can even keep us separated from ourselves. And my very first guest on this new iteration of my broadcast is Roger Breisch. Roger, thanks so much for being on this, for being my guinea pig.
Now that you've described the meaning of this, maybe I'm the wrong person.
You see, that speaks highly of you because you're modest. Now, Roger, you have been doing a Socrates Cafe in Geneva, Illinois forever.
Yeah, it's been 16, 17 years. I was trying to locate the exact date that we started, but it's been at least 16 or 17 years. It was shortly after I read your book.
What was it about reading it that prompted you to do this? Because you do a lot of complimentary things, and I'm honored that this fits into your complimentary thing.
Oh, my heavens. Oh, so well. What's wonderful is I love the interchange of what I do in other parts of my life with the Socrates Cafe and what I've learned about the power of questions as opposed to declarative sentences, and it all kind of seems to fit. You have no idea, as you know, I spend 4 hours a week on a suicide hotline. You have no idea how often those stories of people's stories fit so well into our conversation at Socrates Cafe.
Can you tell me
my
about
life
that?
kind of fits together in a nice web.
Yeah, tell me about how your work with the suicide hotline and how this meshes a bit with that.
Well, it's so much of the work we do in the Socrates Cafe. I was looking at several of the books that you have written that I have read. Socrates in Law was one that I particularly was focusing on this morning, and it is about excellence. But so many of the quotes in that book are about we can't individually be excellent unless we're excellent together. All of us are excellent, and we encourage each other to be excellent. And so the struggles that people have, then they call them the suicide hotline, bring so much just valuable information about the nature of the human journey and the power of suffering and what that brings into our lives and what we learn from that.
You know, I've certainly been on the brink at times in my life, and I feel that Socrates Cafe itself was an affirmative way of making sure that I didn't reach those nadirs of despair that some of my friends have.
Oh boy, I tell you, it's much more pervasive than what we talk about generally in our culture. As a side note, there's one gentleman, Glenn Odell, who's 93, who's been at the Socrates Cafe since the very beginning in Geneva, and he just absolutely loves it because at age 93, he seldom gets out. And this is his one thing twice a month where he gets out and he gets to meet people. And so for him, I think this, in some sense, Socrates Cafe is a life-saving thing for him.
Well, it's interesting because I've done a lot of these at nursing homes.
Yes.
And it's no longer a surprise to me when the activities director at a nursing home says, you know, she came to this and she's never come to any of our other activities over the course of years. She comes to Socrates Cafe. That childlike, but by no means childish questioning nature, where people want to keep probing till their last breath, literally, is, I think my operating premises is something innate in all of us, but that just gets shunted off because of the world that we're surrounded with, that controls us, and lots of that.
Well, but there's another piece to the Socrates Cafe, and that is about listening, and not listening to wait for applause so that I can speak. It's about truly listening and having other people in the circle be heard. And I think that's so important, especially in senior communities, youth communities. There's so much of our lives where we're talking and nobody is listening.
Amen. Now your website is rebreisch.net, is that right?
Well, rebreisch.net, or I use rebreisch.com, but either one will get you there.
Okay, so REBREISCH.com.
Yes.
And you have on that brilliant TED Talk.
Oh, well, there's
Very,
actually,
very stirring and very moving.
thank you.
And
There's actually two of them on there now. I did another
yes,
one about a
that's
year
what.
ago.
Yes, I said TED Talks.
Oh, I'm
Um,
sorry. Okay.
yeah, and so tell me about those, because I mean, your experience comes from so many directions. I mean, you got two master's degrees, one of them in math. You're an MIT guy. I mean, and yet you've got this great humility, and you relate to people of so many different circumstances.
Oh, that's very, very kind of you. You know, it's often said we understand our lives so much better looking backwards than we do looking forwards, and that's certainly true for me. Um, so I at this point in time in my life, I'm not working full time anymore. I speak, I write as much as I can, and it really is about following the invitations in my life. Where am I invited to go? And based upon those invitations, that's what determines my life.
Mm-hmm. Where did that come from? I mean, where did that philosophy of life and living come from? Follow the invitations, that element of serendipity. Where did that come from?
Well, 25 years ago, a friend of mine said his New Year's resolution was to pay attention to invitations, and I've never forgotten that. But I think there is a way in which, in this Western culture, we are encouraged to rearrange the universe to have it do our bidding. My philosophy is the opposite. What am I being asked to contribute? The world knows what I have to give for the most part. There's lots of people that know me and know what I've done and what I have to give. So, it's try to tread lightly on the world and not make it do my bidding, but to do what I'm called to do. Does that make sense?
It makes sense, but where did it come from? Where did you get that?
I don't know, other than I know that the most powerful things in my life have been based upon the invitations to which I have said yes. Um, the suicide prevention hotline work came 18 years ago now, when my son was a junior in high school, and there was an organization in town. I knew nothing about suicide or suicide prevention, but an organization in the town where I live that focuses on that. I was asked to meet with their board of directors because I'm very involved in the community, and somebody said they could use your help because you know so many people in town. I met with their board. My son was a junior in high school, and most of the board members had lost children, many of them college students, to suicide. They never saw it coming, and it just scared me. So I said, I don't know anything about suicide. How would I learn? And they said, well, we'll teach you how to answer calls on our suicide hotline. It's 80 hours of training, and we'll do that for free if you will stay for a year, 4 hours a week. Well, 17 years later, I'm still there, because I've learned so much about life by being there. It is stressful, it's difficult work, but it is some of the most life-affirming and rewarding work that I've ever done. And that's only because I said yes to an invitation. But I think that part of our Western culture is we can do anything we want to the earth, to the planet, to our society, as long as we're making it do our bidding. What I want the future to look like is what's important. And I guess the older I get, the more I disagree with that philosophy. That could we look out into the world, determine based upon where we're being invited, what it is we have to give, and give rather than force the future to do our bidding. I still haven't answered your question about where it came from. I don't know. I just know the older I get, the more passionate I am about that is the way I think humans need to learn to live in this world. And I mean, everybody disagrees with me, but
Do they?
everybody tells me that the way to be successful is to make plans, to make goals, to write your goals, your 6-month goals, your 3-month goals, your 1-week goals, your 5-minute goals, and write them all down. And that's all about making the world do my bidding. And if I can be crude, to hell with everybody else. I want the world to go in that direction. And I think that very basic philosophy, if you will, has gotten us, certainly in our Western culture, into great difficulty.
So way back when I had a quarterly magazine for the nonprofit Socrates Cafe magazine. And we're
Yeah.
actually finally going to resuscitate it,
Are
resurrect
you?
it. Yeah, through
Great.
through medium.com. I have this
Okay.
fabulous volunteer young guy who plucked my book off a used bookstore bookshelf and now is my go-to guy. So talk about, like, I was hesitant at first when he wanted to start this again. I'm like, oh God. But no, it's really good. But what the reason I bring it up, Roger, is because you wrote an essay for our publication, I think almost exactly 10 years ago,
Oh, my.
about a question, what is life?
Hmm.
You remember
Well,
that?
I don't remember that.
Yeah, you did. And you talked about the Gaia hypothesis
Oh, yeah.
and how this notion that automated things may become more intelligent than human things. So, but
I,
no, it was prescient, I think. It was
yeah.
a decade
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
You don't remember?
No, I don't. I don't. But
Yeah.
I've done and written and read so many things. I really am a passionate learner. And I guess maybe this is the other thing that plays into not wanting to make the world do my bidding, because after all the things I've read, all the things I've thought about, I have no idea which way the world should go to make it better. I mean, I really don't. All I can do is bring what I have to offer and offer it and give it as fully and completely as I can. And then what from the Bhagavad Gita, do your work and let go of results.
Well, it's interesting though. I was thinking about, I have dual U.S. Greek citizenship, and
Yes.
I think about this creative tension that has existed in our most creative, playful societies. Also, Florence, when it was at its most flourishing. I mean, there was this sort of push-pull, beautiful kind of exhilarating tension where, I mean, the sum was greater than, the whole was greater than the sum of its parts, and everybody sort of was trying to get the world to do some element of its bidding or some manifestation through their forms of inquiry, whether it's artistic, humanistic, scientific, or all of them at the same time, but without necessarily knowing where it was going to go.
So here's a question. I've asked this actually at the Socrates Cafe in Geneva. Is there any other species that has ever existed on the planet that fundamentally changes its environment for its own benefit? Every species changes its environment. Beavers build dams, ants build anthills, but they don't fundamentally change the environment in huge ways that can't be undone. We're the only species that believes that this planet is here for us to do with it whatever we want and rearrange it in any way we want for our sole benefit. I think that's not sustainable long term.
But is it in part a lack of imaginative vision, that inability to see and even envision 5 generations from now, 500 generations from now, 5,000 generations from now?
Yeah.
Are we bereft of that now just by this whole way of trying to get things to do our bidding right now in the here and now in a very self-serving way?
Many years ago, I visited one of the cathedrals in Nantes, France, and I stood there realizing that it was 400 years in the making. And I stood next to one of the stone pillars, realizing that the mason who built the piece of the stone pillar that I was standing next to, he built that probably 100 years after the cathedral was started, and it would not be finished until 200 or 300 years after he died. That sense of I'm giving what I have in whatever way I can for the benefit of the future. I have no idea what that's going to be, but I will give what I have to give here in this little piece. We don't, everything we do today, can you imagine, you talk about, can you imagine being involved in a project that won't be finished for 400 years? I can't.
Socrates could.
Well,
he was willing to die because he thought, well, that's no big deal. I mean, others will carry the torch.
And so were the Masons in France as they built the cathedrals.
I love this riff because a lifetime ago I was a magazine writer, and I wrote
Yeah.
feature stories. And there was a man, what you just said, and I haven't thought about this in decades. I wrote a feature about a man named Korczak Ziolkowski. He
Okay.
was a Polish immigrant who
Yeah.
settled in South Dakota, and he was asked by Sioux Indians when they discovered he was a sculptor to make this enormous sculpture on the side of a mountain for Crazy Horse.
Oh, yes.
They said, you've got all of the Mount Rushmore icons, but we have ours too.
Yes.
So he knew if he agreed that it would never, ever, ever be done in his lifetime. And his like 10 children and his wife
Yes.
to this day, he died decades ago.
Yes.
I mean, before I started learning about this, I'd been going out and doing dialogues with the Lakota Sioux for many, many years. But he was one of those people that you're talking about. It didn't matter to him if this was unfinished business. What mattered was to get the business started because it was greater than himself. And time mattered and didn't matter. You know, they made remarkable progress. It's got a long way to go. But the main thing was to start and start and start and start.
Right, and then trust. Like I say, the one of the main messages from the Bhagavad Gita is you have the right to your efforts, but you have no right to the results of your efforts. Do your work and let go of results, because we can't know what's going to happen based upon what you or I or any of us do in this world. What is going to be the result of all that? We can't know. We will never know. So do the work that you can, the best that you can, and then let it go.
What do you do about things that you can't let go? Like just things that come your way. I was thinking about, I unexpectedly for the first time had an accident. I broke 3 ribs.
Oh, yes.
Just completely derailed me for quite some time. And it's like, it was a form of imprisonment in some ways. I couldn't exercise. I started, changed my entire regimen about things. And then I had to, I couldn't get my body to do my bidding, and so I managed to make it through 60 years. And I played soccer all my life. It's not like I'm cautious, but all of a sudden things come your way. And the tragic death of my father, how that steered me. But over time, if you can survive it, and you're pummeled for a while, you're beaten down, but if you can somehow get through that, it opens up new horizons.
And I won't remember it now, but there's a wonderful poem in one of my TED Talks from Rumi about, welcome all the visitors in our life, because they've come here as teachers to teach you something important. As you know, I just had surgery, so for the next couple of weeks, I've got to lie low. And that opportunity to do nothing, if you will, to just rest, to relax, to read, and not feel guilty about, I'm not doing this, and this is on my to-do list, and that's on my to-do list. What a freeing opportunity for 2 weeks to say, it's okay. And so I said earlier, pay attention to invitation. This is an invitation for me. Your broken ribs were an invitation for you to see life in a slightly new way. And rather than reject it and wish that it hadn't happened, is to welcome it, accept it, and say, what is it here to teach me?
Can I wish it hadn't happened, but still let it teach me something?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I on the suicide hotline, I talk to people all the time who have just suffered horrific life circumstances. And I say all the time, I wish that I could snap my fingers and make sure that it never happened to you, but I can't. But in spite of that, are you learning something about what it means to be human that you can use to help others? And the response that I get almost every time is, you have no idea what I'm learning from this experience that I can use to help others. And so everything that comes to us, again, the Guest House is the poem by Rumi, where he says, welcome everything that enters your life, whether it be a crowd of sorrows or a joy or a meanness. Welcome them all, because they sweep your house clean, because they're here to teach you something new.
Something I have never written about, but I'm writing about in my new book. It was still just something I wasn't ready to write about. Was that one of the reasons I started Socrates Cafe in '96 was the result of a suicide of a very dear friend.
Oh, really?
Not only that, but I wasn't there that night when she tried to call me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This was the days before cell phones
Right.
and all
Mm,
that, and there she was calling
mm.
my phone. I was out and just hanging up.
I'm
It was on
sorry.
my voice message machine, those things that don't exist anymore. But it
Yeah.
also broke away a lot of self-imposed barriers about how I might live my life. You know, she was in her early 20s. I was in my latter 30s.
Yeah.
I had been her school teacher, but I was 22 and she was 16.
Wow.
She had been a victim of sexual abuse by her stepfather.
Right.
But it ultimately got me to ask myself, not in a facile way, but what did I need to do to break out, to bounce out of bed in the morning? Even if it was risky, petrifying, filled with dread, and exciting as hell, you know. And this
Yeah.
Socrates Cafe thing was that thing, or at least what I thought it was. It was a premise to be tested.
You know, everything that we experience in our lives becomes part of who we are. Um, I did an interview with our local sheriff who told the story about when he was 10 years old. This is on my blog. When he was 10 years old, his father walked out on he and his mother with his girlfriend, and he said that moment changed him. And he said he decided from that moment on that his father leaving could send him in one of two directions, either downhill or use that as a way to propel himself to prove that that wasn't going to be the thing that destroyed him. And he says that every decision, he's now our county sheriff, and he's amazing. Every decision he's made since that has been based upon the fact that one. I asked him in my interview, I said, so if you go back and change the world, this is back to your question, kind of wish that it hadn't happened. If you could go back and change the world so that in a way that your father never left, would you do it? And he looked at me with this pained expression. He said, that's a tough question. Nobody's ever asked me. And then he paused for a minute and he goes, I wouldn't. I would not go back and change, I said change the future, change the past. I would not go back and change the past because that had such an impact on who I became as an individual. So I think anytime we take those things that we wish wouldn't have happened and understand that they have become part of who we are. In your particular example, it became an important part of who you became.
I don't know if I'd be doing what I'm doing if it hadn't been for that.
Well, and
We'll
you
never
and I
know.
wouldn't be talking. So what a disaster would that be?
Well, it's funny because, you know, even Socrates Cafe, the grand plan was just to have one group in Montclair, New
Really,
Jersey, which to this
really.
day meets every Tuesday night. I was just there for a year. They meet, I mean, it was 96. That was 24 years ago, and they still meet every Tuesday night. And then it's now just exploded. As I told you, my book just came out in the Middle East. It's a mushroom there. I'll be going prospectively to Saudi Arabia during their book fair in April. Places
Really,
I'd never anticipated, ever.
right.
With the momentum now more than ever, especially, well, across the fruited plain of the U.S., but also, and then here you are with that long-term commitment, sort of this wonderful arc over this almost the entire course of the Socrates Cafe endeavor.
Yeah.
Just speaks to how committed you are about meaningful things.
I don't know if I ever told you about how I discovered your book. Did I ever tell you that story? I was in Florida and I heard a journalist give a wonderful presentation in this seminar. And it wasn't anything about Socrates Cafe, but I went up and chatted with him. And we were talking about our love of reading and learning. And he looked at me and he says, well, certainly you've read Socrates Cafe by Christopher Phillips. And I said, no, I haven't. Tell me about it. So I came back to the Chicago area where I live, and I bought a copy. I don't know if you've ever heard of Houston Smith, who wrote The World's Religions. I flew to San Francisco and sat in his living room to interview him. And after I finished that, I had a night in a hotel there, and I pulled out your book and I opened up to page 1, and I realized that your story in that book began in San Francisco. And I thought, this is
That's wild.
this
It's
is
at Magda's Tea
and so I sat there in that hotel in San Francisco and I began reading your book, and then I came back to Chicago and started. So that would have been, I could find the exact date that I interviewed Houston Smith, but that would have been probably 2001, I think. And then I came back here and started the Socrates Cafe shortly after that. So that's probably
Incredible.
18 years. Yeah, the thread of how our lives intersect is interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think today was a propitious day for you and I finally to do this.
Well, I'm so appreciative. I'm appreciative of the fact that you wanted to do this with me. Believe me, I really, really am.
Oh, it's sincerely felt for
But
a very long time.
well, I'm very appreciative of what you have brought to the world, and through your work, what you've brought to all of us here in Geneva, and to Glenn Odell, this 93-year-old
I
man.
need to meet Glenn.
Well, you did meet Glenn, I think, when you came to Elgin Community College.
Oh, there we go. I
He
need to
was.
meet Glenn again.
You need to meet Glenn again
I'm
because
an
your
inveterate
work,
campaigner. I miss that area where you are.
yeah, your work has been so important to him over the last 18 years.
That makes me feel really good. I know it must make you feel good too. I mean, that
Yep.
push-pull of doing things, selfish and selfless reasons, it gives life of meaning to many people, many unexpected people and players, so to speak.
That's another topic we've talked about in Socrates Cafe. Is there anything that we do that isn't at its heart selfish? Because
And what's wrong with that? I started this for selfish reasons. I was perplexed, and I felt like I needed the considered insights of thoughtful others.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so it's filled a lot of needs among a lot of different people, mostly mine. And there's no accident that I still enjoy doing this after so many, many years and so many different kinds of stuff.
Right.
Well, Roger, to be continued.
Okay. Great.
I'm gonna list your TED Talks and your website on. This is now on our Socrates. Going to be on our Socrates Cafe YouTube page.
Okay.
You'll be in very good company. That's where I have videos with Cornell West and my kid.
Oh, yeah.
But this is my latest thing. And so the Cafe Aretista is at a cafe. I figured, I'm a cafe guy. You don't have to be at a cafe, but I feel like I do. This is an exciting new iteration of it fits my personality much more than the previous podcast did.
Well, as I say, I appreciate your patience with me because I would have been in a cafe today too, except as I said, I'm recovering from some surgery, so I can't get out. So thank you for your willingness to negotiate here.
Oh, my pleasure, and hope we cross paths in person sometime soon.
I hope so.
Thanks so much.
Take care. Thank you.